The search for clean fuels began a long time ago. Indeed, the history of biodiesel began as far back as the 1850s, paving the way eventually for Rudolf Diesel to demonstrate his engine running on peanut oil at the Paris Exposition in 1900. The problem was, though, that petrol turned out to be cheaper and had started to make plenty of people a great deal of money. So clean fuels got sidelined. Biodiesel re-emerged as a credible alternative in the 1970s during the energy crisis, and today, as the world searches for solutions to our environmental challenges, clean fuels themselves are big business. But it's not entirely straightforward. It needs a desire to innovate and real commitment to overcome the hurdles involved. And one company in the UK rail sector that is very much at the vanguard of all that are called Europhoenix. And what's even better, they're doing all of this with a fleet of Class 37 locomotives. Classic traction dating back to the 1960s, and not something you'd expect to be at the leading edge of clean fuel technology. And on Tuesday the 3rd of February 2026, all the hard work Europhoenix have put into this project is about to be put to the ultimate test of all. They're taking a Class 37 out on the main line from Leicester to Barrow Hill and back, powered entirely by HVO, Hydrotreated Vegetable Oil. And I've been invited along for the ride. My travelling companion for the day is Neil Bennett, formerly the founder of leasing company Beacon Rail, now the executive chairman of European leasing company Next Rail, and a good friend of Europhoenix's dynamic founder, Glenn Edwards. We arrive at Leicester and walk over to UKRL's office and signing on point. I sign my cab pass to say I have understood all the safety issues and what is expected of me today, and we're ready. In the main shed, 37-218 is waiting, gleaming in its dramatic special livery. But before we set off, I chat to Glenn about how Europhoenix itself came into being. Glenn, we're here in Leicester. We've got this fantastic locomotive behind you. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just talk about Europhoenix Rail. What was the idea behind it? How did you come up with the idea to get involved in this?
Okay, so yeah, Europhoenix started mainly as an export company. So we were looking at Class 86s and Class 87s when they were finished within the UK. We found a market abroad in Europe, both in Hungary and Bulgaria, and spent quite a few years exporting probably most of the fleet, I think over 50 locos in total, to Eastern Europe for further use. When we left the EU, that sort of changed the situation in regards to export and made it very difficult. The homologation process then became very complicated, and we had to find work in the UK and a different road to go down. From that, we looked at spot hire in the UK. Class 37s at the time were being withdrawn and being made available by DB, EWS at the time, and DRS. So we looked at buying them locos and entering the spot hire market in the UK.
And how big's the fleet today? How many 37s?
11 locos at the moment.
So and they're all 37s?
They're all 37s, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have a big relationship with Rail Operations Group as well, don't you? So they actually have, I think, some of your locos on what I would probably describe as long-term arrangements. Is that right?
Yeah. So, brilliant relationship with Rail Operations Group. We've had 6 locos on hire to them for sort of nigh on 10 years now. They've reduced that to 4 because of the new 93s coming on stream. So they're going to carry on with 4 locos for another 3 years. Given that Glenn's fleet is now entirely made up of Class 37s, I have to ask the obvious question.
So look, the Class 37, it's an extraordinary engine. It's been around since the early 60s. Why is it so good?
They've got such a following, both by enthusiasts and, in business as well. They're fully supportable. The engine in them, you can still buy the components for them. And if you look at 47s where, the Sulzer engine wasn't supported quite the same, and then that became a big problem for them. much bigger class, 512, I think it was, 47s built, as opposed to the 37s, but you can still get pretty much everything for them. There is an obsolescence issues on some parts, but we can generally make them. You know, you think they're 60 years young now, so I can see them going probably for another 10 years.
Another 10 years.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
extraordinary. And how, I mean, is it because you can get bits for them that they've carried on as so long? I'm presuming that on the loco behind you, some of it's new, some of it's replaced.
Oh, she's Trigger's broom, definitely. she's definitely Trigger's broom. I don't know how much of that loco left Vulcan Foundry 60 years ago and how much of it's still on her now.
Brilliant.
But yeah, I think it's a number of things. You know, it's the fact that they can be supported still, and also the fact that, you know, nobody's going to build another Type 3. Everything now is heavy. It's Type 5, RA7. You know, you've got a Type 3 RA5 locomotive that can pretty much go the entire network, and that's what really has kept the 37 going. It's its versatility to go anywhere in the network.
Because they are so flexible, life extension is a serious option. So is that the reason for looking at HVO as much as anything else? One of the things I love about them, which is maybe a small thing, is you can paint them literally anything and they manage to look great, and they looks fantastic in this sort of special HVO livery you've got this one in. Why go down the HVO route? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, we looked at a number of, you know, solutions for extending the life of 37, because obviously we're under the same environmental pressures as everybody else, you know, and it's pretty obvious nobody's going to spend sort of £7 million on a new Type 3 for rail services when the loco might only be used once or twice,
Sure.
you know, a week. So we looked at battery, we looked at a replacement engine, a more modern engine with better emissions, but they all came back too expensive, or you know, they wouldn't have suited the need of the business and the marketplace. So we looked at HVO as an option. Obviously, massive CO2 saving of up to 90%. Also a reduction in the NOx and stuff like that. It is slightly more expensive to buy than the normal diesel, but you know, it moves the loco forward into a modern day platform.
So why not just use waste vegetable oil? In theory, any diesel engine should be able to use vegetable oil. Well, regular vegetable oil is much thicker than regular diesel. It also contains more glycerin and absorbs more water, which isn't great. And put simply, in 2026, there are much better solutions, like HVO. The H bit stands for hydrotreating, in which the molecular structure of the vegetable oil is altered through the addition of hydrogen and the removal of oxygen. This process creates uniform molecules and carbon chains and removes nasty impurities like sulfur. HVO has very similar chemical properties to diesel, and so it's known as a drop-in fuel. And that means you can mix different proportions of HVO and standard diesel in the same tank at the same time. And whilst HVO has slightly lower fuel density, it's much cleaner, plus its low carbon content means up to 90% reduction in CO2. And because it's a paraffinic fuel, it performs much better in cold temperatures than diesel. That's partly because it has a lower viscosity, or in English, it's a bit runnier. Although that does mean you need to make sure all your seals are nice and tight. A bit of a challenge with a 60-year-old locomotive. There have been a few engineering challenges along the way to overcome, but the team have taken it all in their stride.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit to do. I mean, red diesel can suffer from diesel bug, which is a bacterial form that can then live in the old fuel tanks. So we've had to, you know, completely clean the fuel tanks out and remove all of the old traces of normal diesel. You can mix it going forward, but we didn't want to mix it to start with. We want to start afresh. We've done a big upgrade to the fuel system, and obviously baselined the engine to ensure that, you know, we started from a blank canvas, if you like, to make sure that we do the test properly, so we know what challenges are ahead, if any, from the change of fuel.
As I wander around the loco, admiring it from every conceivable angle, I ask Glenn how it's going and just how important is today's test. And how's it gone so far? Are you pleased with early
Yeah.
sort of shakedown test?
No, all good so far. Touch wood, but yeah.
Although having said that, this is the first really big trip out
Yeah,
on the network, isn't it? I must
it
admit,
is,
I'm
yeah.
incredibly excited about that. I'm very honoured. So this is this the real test?
This will be one of them, yes, yeah, and then some loaded test runs after this to get a feel for how it performs, yes.
We're getting close to departure time, so Colin Hatton, our driver for the day, comes into the shed to fire up first 37423 and then 37218, the locomotive that has been converted to HVO. Although we are running light engine to Barrow Hill today, the team are taking 2 locomotives just in case, and it's a sensible precaution. Although the initial tests have gone very well, today we're going to be out on the mainline, and we do not want to find ourselves the cause of significant delay. I climb into the cab and settle down for the trip. I'm joined by Steve Ellis, Head of Operations for Europhoenix. To begin with, Colin is at the other end of the consist of 2 locomotives, because we're going to go south to Leicester station first and then reverse before heading north. It's a really miserable, cold, dank, grey day, but nothing can dampen my sense of excitement as we set off north and onto the Midland Main Line itself. This is an extraordinarily busy section of railway. We pass freight heading north, and then the curious sight of 2 HST power cars now owned by Rail Adventure, and a very short freight working heading south. We pass Loughborough, and under the new bridge that in due course will reunify the 2 sections of the Great Central Railway. Before passing the iconic Brush Falcon Works, birthplace amongst other things of the British Rail Class 47 and Class 60. At Chesterfield, with its famous twisted spire church, rail enthusiasts are out in force to record this important test run. Just north of Chesterfield, we turn right at Tapton Junction, and soon we are approaching Barrow Hill sidings, where a pair of Class 60s for DC Rail are also present. 60099 Benmore Ascent has just been returned to traffic, and it looks absolutely superb. To my delight, we're not going to reverse at the reception sidings, but instead we're going into Barrow Hill itself. So we traverse the exceptionally tight curve, passing a Deltic and other heritage traction along the way. Before crossing the large level crossing, and then setting back into the platform at Barrow Hill Station. There's time to stretch our legs, admire the engines, and take some all-important photographs and video footage. We don't have too long though, and soon we're back on the locos for the return trip. We repeat the same exercise of running up the head shunt, then changing direction, back past the depots at Barrow Hill before heading out onto the main line again. Although first Colin has to confirm with the signaller that he's got permission to draw forward onto Network Rail metals. We pass through Chesterfield heading south, and this time there are fewer enthusiasts present to record our passing. past Clay Cross Junction. The Derby line swings off to the right, but we bear left along the Erewash main line towards Alfreton. We pass Bennerley Viaduct, the iron giant of the Erewash Valley. Built in 1878 by the Great Northern Railway, it is the longest Victorian wrought iron viaduct in the country, and one of only two still standing. Then through the mighty Toton Yard, mecca of rail enthusiasts in the 1970s and 1980s. It's a shadow of its former self now, and although still impressive, the rows of stored and out-of-use locomotives are a rather depressing reminder that the days of coal trains in this part of the world are now but a memory. As we wait at Trent South Junction for our path, yet another freight passes by. Soon we are passing the giant cooling towers of Britain's last coal-fired power station at Ratcliffe-on-Soar. It too lies silent. We have a spirited run back to Leicester, Colin managing to reach 75 miles an hour en route as we pass a wide variety of East Midlands railway trains along the way. Earlier, when we'd started at Leicester, I had asked Glenn if HVO led to any power loss, and he'd said not that you'd notice. And are there any sort of performance impacts with it? Does the fact you're using HVO drop the power a bit, or how does that work?
Yeah, there's various reports have been done on that, and I think the lowest I've seen is around about 95% power compared to normal diesel. But you know, talking to the drivers today, you'll get a bit of a feel for it. But no, I don't think the drivers can feel any difference in power. And plus the weights we pull, sort of 600-800 tons max, it's not needed, you know.
Right. And after 80 miles out on the railway today, Colin, our driver, confirmed that he too had not noticed any performance drop on the HVO locomotive compared to traditional diesel either. All too soon we arrive back at Leicester, with the Motive Power Depot on our left, classic traction standing side by side with the most modern of all locomotives, GB Rail Freight's mighty new Class 99 dual-mode monsters. Back into the station reception sidings, and Colin changes ends once more to run us back into the depot. (37218) did not miss a beat, and in fact it was 37423 that sounded as if it had the occasional burble slightly out of place. But that's the joy of Class 37s. They all sound a bit like that from time to time, but yet they keep going, utterly reliable, utterly dependable. What Europhoenix have done is brilliant. They've taken a 64-year-old locomotive and modified it such that it could last another 10 years, and it shows a clean pair of heels to most things claiming to be clean diesel in terms of CO2 emissions and particulates. It's the perfect marriage of classical design and modern technology. The phoenix is a mythical, immortal bird that symbolises rebirth and renewal. And there is no better way to turn myth into reality in 2026 than with this magnificent HVO modified Class 37. What a day, and what a locomotive.